Why do you think the way you do about sex? The way you think about sex is actually downstream from how you think about yourself. And we have all been conditioned by cultural ideas and cultural movements to think about ourselves and to think about sex in a certain way.
Your little gerbil-sized brain has been reprogrammed by the media to believe sex is the be-all, end-all.
One helpful model was sketched by historian Carl Trueman, who traces our conception of the modern self all the way back to the 1700s. The outline goes like this. First, the self became psychologized. Second, psychology became sexualized. And finally, sexuality became politicized. Let's explore these concepts and see if this model explains our modern mindset towards the self and towards sex. What does it mean that the self became psychologized? Well, first it's important to say that psychology is a valuable scientific field studying human behavior and mental health. But to understand what Trueman means by the self became psychologized, we can look at 3 criteria: dependency, education, and maturity. First, dependency. It used to be that you would see yourself as born dependent upon others and with certain obligations towards others. But the modern self says that you are born completely independent and able to create your own identity.
I don't want a new family. I don't want any family. And I don't want to see anybody else either.
I hope you don't mean that. You'd feel pretty sad if you woke up tomorrow morning and you didn't have a family.
Education. It used to be that education was about learning truth, how to discern truth, and about the needs of the world and how I can meet those needs. The modern self says that education is about enabling me to express outwardly what I feel inwardly.
It's not just about expressing yourself to everyone else. It's about expressing yourself to yourself.
And finally, maturity. It used to be that growing up was this process by which I learned to control my feelings, to act with restraint and responsibility, and to sacrifice when needed my desires to those of the community and for the welfare of those around me. But the modern self says that growing up is actually a process not of learning restraint, but capitalizing on our opportunities to express ourselves.
Just be yourself. Be yourself. Be yourself.
We can summarize the view of the modern self with the phrase, expressive individualism. Expressive individualism, let's define it as each person has a unique core feeling and intuition that should unfold or be expressed if individuality is to be truly realized.
Oh, I used to think I was crazy, but Dr. Biber told me that there are a lot of other people out there who are trans species. All I did is change my appearance to look the way I felt.
The modern self is one where authenticity is achieved by acting outwardly in accordance with one's inward feelings. So, you be you. Be true to yourself. Follow your heart. Find yourself. In other words, you are what you feel.
It defines who I am.
We're not saying you have... What?
Trueman traces this line of thought mainly back to the Genevan philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the 1700s. It sounds like a highly intellectual concept, but it's one that you can actually see in much of our children's entertainment today, interestingly enough.
It's blank.
There is no secret ingredient. To make something special, you just have to believe it's special.
It's nothing!
There is no secret ingredient. It's just you.
It's time to see what I can do to test the limits and break through. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. When will my reflection show who I am inside?
Just be you.
Just be me?
Yep. Concentrate on the moment. Feel. Don't think.
You are the one you've been waiting for. Show yourself.
If you think it, want it, dream it, then it's real. You are what you feel.
We've been training kids from the earliest ages to be expressive individualists. And of course, expression is a beautiful and an important thing, and we are individuals. But by expressive individualists, I mean specifically that we are training our kids that their highest obligation and sense of self is their own inner feelings. This is opposed to the idea of an objective human nature to which we ought to look for an objective criteria for how we can seek true human happiness. That objective criteria based on human nature is what traditionally we call morality. So with expressive individualism, no longer are we interested in human nature or morality as guides to true happiness, just our inner feelings. Notice how a conception of self based on inner feelings actually redefines what it means to love. The classical definition of love is the pursuit of the good for the other. So if I love you, I have a conception of what is good and what creates ultimate human happiness, and I'm pursuing that for you, even despite the sacrifices that I may need to make myself.
Going to Mordor alone. Of course you are. And I'm coming with you!
But if the chief good is the expression of someone's inner feelings, no matter what they are, then love has to include an absolute affirmation of a person's inner feelings as a guide to how they should behave regardless of reality. To say that someone's inner feelings may misguide them or not correspond to what is objectively true and good is to be inherently unloving of them.
Mr. Sandsweet didn't want to be saved, and the injury received from Mr. Incredible's actions, so-called, causes him daily pain.
Hey, I saved your life!
You didn't save my life, you ruined my death!
And to be clear, feelings are important, and they should be respected and explored and not repressed. But the end should be understanding of one's feelings. Why are we feeling this way? Do we need to make changes in our thoughts or our behaviors that influence our feelings? Do we need healing from a harm we experienced? What's the right response to this feeling? Feelings are a signal, an important one, but they're not a guide.
I wish that I could bake a cake made out of rainbows and smiles, and we'd all eat it, be happy.
She doesn't even go here.
Do you even go to this school?
No, I just have a lot of feelings.
Think about the impact of expressive individualism. This gives the individual limitless power to reject any correction from someone else.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
For example, at any time, I can claim that someone is not listening to or affirming my inner feelings enough and make the case that someone else is being unloving of me. And because the ultimate criteria for love is my inner feelings, which no one has access to but myself, I have limitless power to reject someone else's concern or correction, even if I am wrong about an objective reality.
You know, Bianca's a missionary.
But this puts me in a dangerous position if someone else is objectively seeking what is good and true on my behalf, but I'm rejecting that. So we have to recognize the power of the self being psychologized and our identity being located in our inner feelings. It affects everything, not just the way we see ourselves, but our relationships. But of course, we have lots of inner feelings. How are we to know which ones are the most important? To answer that question, we look to the next stage of the modern journey. Psychology becomes sexualized. The key thinker here is the psychologist Sigmund Freud. He taught that the fundamental form of human happiness was the genital pleasure derived from sex. The idea here is that our identities as human beings are in a very important sense fundamentally defined by our sexual desires. Freud believed that sexual desires are not things we have or experience. Sexual desires are the core of who we are. Our sexual desires, whatever they are our identity. He even went as far as identifying any number of desires as sexual. Though Freud is the key thinker here, he is part of a larger movement of using sexual urges as designations of identity. For example, in the late 19th century, around the time Freud was born, the terms heterosexual and homosexual were first used as terms of identity. Prior to this, having a sexual desire for someone of the same sex didn't mean that that was your identity. It meant that you had a sexual urge towards someone of the same sex. Here's some biology 101. Our bodies are clearly designed a certain way, and our reproductive function has an obvious purpose. So despite any number of sexual attractions that one may have, a man's body is designed to fit a woman's body. And by uniting together in the sexual act, the man and the woman are able to create a unique new human life, which the woman then gestates with her body. This is why core morality around sex requires that to have sex, one man and one woman must be freely committed to each other for life in a marriage where they are open to create any children they may have. Of course, there are endless other ways one can orgasm, can masturbate, and use other people's bodies for masturbation, but that's not the design of sex or our bodies. Severing human sexuality from this design and making it about whatever feelings, desires, or fantasies that we may have isn't the discovery of some authentic identity. Historically, before the self became psychologized and then sexualized, people generally understood that human beings may have varying sexual desires, and some would need to be restrained and others pursued based on our moral understanding. But sexual desire wasn't who they were. Sexual urges didn't define how a person loved or received love, because love, the pursuit of the good for someone else, was broader than the way we felt and what our sexual urges might be. The concepts of any sexual orientation outside of how our bodies are defined as a fixed way that a person should love, and various sexual identities as the way that a person is, all of that was invented at the end of the 19th century, which is to say, yesterday. Today, sexual desire as identity is a given in our culture. Think about it. One of the first ways that young adults are told to think about their identity is as straight, or bi, or gay, or poly, or asexual.
Hi, my name is Asa. I am a member of the DID system, and I'm also a bearded vulturetharian.
Their sexual affinities, they're told, define the community to which they believe they belong, such as the LGBTQ community. We're also told to believe that sexual desires cannot change, that they're fixed from birth, and that to deny them is to deny a person's happiness, dignity, and identity.
Using correct pronouns is suicide prevention and basic human dignity.
There's also a tremendous lack of curiosity around why do we have these sexual desires, and deeply understanding where these desires may come from. Perhaps someone is seeking something deeply from their childhood that they were missing, or perhaps they experienced a harm that then made them have a sexual desire that is different than what they naturally otherwise would have. The final stage of the making of the modern self, according to Truman, is when sexuality, or one's feelings about sexuality held as one's identity, becomes politicized. The final step is, if any number of sexual desires are a person's immutable identity, and now there are potentially countless identities based on these desires, then it's argued that we should accord those sexual desires and sexual identities with special political rights.
All the bigots out there, no matter how hard you try, you can never erase those words from the Declaration of Independence.
And so it becomes the job of the government to protect whatever somebody says their sexual identity is. And it becomes the responsibility of everybody else in society to affirm your sexual desires as your identity. If other people fail to affirm or they disagree, they are considered bigoted or hateful and should be forced to affirm or otherwise be ostracized from society or even legally punished.
They wanted a cake to celebrate their wedding, so they went here to Masterpiece Cake Shop. But owner Jack Phillips refused to bake them a wedding cake. Phillips says same-sex marriages go against his Christian beliefs. They filed a complaint with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission and won. The case then went up to the Colorado Court of Appeals. The couple won again.
Truman cites Karl Marx and Wilhelm Reich as the chief intellectuals behind this movement. Reich was actually the first one to use the term sexual revolution. Reich said that his political party, the political left, was fighting the war against repression. And when his leftism took over the government could finally now fight the war against the oppressors. This flow of thought that the self became psychologized, psychology became sexualized, and then sexuality becomes politicized is how ridiculous statements are popping up everywhere today. This is where we get to the place that people are told to affirm statements like, I am a woman trapped in a man's body, or the entity in the womb is not a human being, or I am a gender fluid, non-binary who is asexual who must also be called they, them.
I would definitely say that I have species dysmorphia.
I have these hands in this body, but internally, I am a leopard.
On all levels except physical, I am a wolf.
If your understanding of yourself and of reality is all in your feelings and not in the whole of nature and your human nature, if your body's own genitals and reproductive function isn't you, but you can somehow be a big mistake, actually, then you can come to believe all sorts of crazy things.
I was born a tree trapped in a man's body, but I'm fixing that.
And if you think you have the right to believe such things because they accord with your sexual desires and the government must use its power to prop up such ideas and punish those who dissent, then crazy, unworkable ideas can suddenly become sustainable. What is the solution here? The solution is to rediscover a robust understanding of natural law morality. This is the idea that human nature and the natural world have a moral structure to them that's designed for human freedom and flourishing. The natural law encompasses the rules and precepts by which humans do good actions and live well. Do good, avoid evil, individually and collectively. When we behave immorally, we violate our own human nature, as well as the natural or created order, and we destroy our survival and our flourishing. This understanding of morality can be shared by multiple religions, and even Christians and atheists can agree on it. God is a creator. He created us a certain way, and to rebel against that created order is actually to rebel against our own design, necessarily resulting in harm to ourselves and harm to other people. We need to recover natural law morality. It's good for everyone. And also remember that when we express these moral ideas, we do it because we want other people's happiness and well-being. We want people to live maximally happy and free lives, free to love. That's the purpose of this whole series on sex.